For 50 years, the old steelworks was a silent tomb of rust and broken glass. Then we found a wall that shouldn't exist, and what we woke up inside was far older and more terrifying than any ghost. They say every old building has a ghost. Most of the time, it's just the wind in the rafters or the groans of settling foundations. It's the kind of thing you say to spook the new guy on the crew. But the Iron Jaw was different. That's what we called the old Corvin Steelworks plant on the industrial outskirts of town. It was a skeletal giant, a cathedral of rust and broken glass that had been silent for 50 years. Our job, my job, was to help gut it. Turn this forgotten beast into luxury loft apartments with exposed brick and ironic industrial chic. I'm Jack. I'm 26. I'm not an architect or a designer. I'm the guy they call when something heavy needs to become something less heavy, usually in a lot of smaller pieces. The place had a smell. Not just decay, not just the damp rot of old wood and plaster. It smelled of cold iron, pigeon droppings, and a century of rain seeping into concrete. It was a heavy, metallic scent that stuck to the back of your throat. We'd been on the site for 3 weeks, and the sheer scale of the main foundry floor still got to me. The ceiling was a cavernous, black void 60 feet up, where colossal cranes hung like metal spiders, frozen in time. The air was always cold, a permanent, bone-deep chill that our portable heaters couldn't touch. You could see your breath from the moment you clocked in to the moment you left. My boss, Dave, is a walking checklist with a tool belt. He sees a job, not a story. To him, the Iron Jaw wasn't a relic. It was a series of problems to be solved with sledgehammers and high-torque drills. On that Tuesday, the problem was a wall. A very, very weird wall. It was on the ground floor in what used to be a foreman's office block, tucked away in a corner of the massive complex. The blueprints we had, faded and brittle things from the 1920s, showed a long, open-plan office space, but there, squatting in the middle of the room like a concrete tombstone, was a wall that shouldn't exist. It was about 10 feet high and maybe 15 feet long, a solid, featureless slab of what looked like poured concrete. No seams, no door, no windows. It wasn't bricked up, it was formed. Like someone had built a box, filled it with concrete, and then just walked away. Dave tapped it with his hammer. The sound didn't echo. It was a flat, dense thud, like hitting solid rock. "Doesn't make a lick of sense," he grunted, rubbing the gray dust on his jeans. "It's not load-bearing. It's not on the plans. Just there. Whatever. I want it gone by Friday. Jack, you and Liam get the breaker on it." Liam was my partner for the day. He's younger than me, barely 20, and still young enough to find the ghost stories cool instead of just a sign of a drafty, dangerous work site. He looked at the wall with wide eyes. "You think they sealed something in there? Like old mob stuff?" I laughed, the sound swallowed by the cavernous space. "More likely a shoddy repair job from the 70s, mate. Now grab the other end of the power cord." We spent the first hour just setting up. The concrete was ridiculously thick. We started with the big diamond blade saw to score a line, the shriek of the blade on the aggregate echoing through the factory like a tortured scream. Then came the heavy work, the electric jackhammer. We called it the dentist. It was a beast of a tool, a solid 50 pounds of vibrating metal that rattled your teeth and turned your arms to jelly. I took the first shift, leaning my weight into it, the chisel tip biting into the surface. Dust billowed out, a thick grey cloud that tasted of lime and grit. We had masks and goggles, but it got everywhere. In my hair, down my collar, coating my tongue. For 3 hours, that was my world. The deafening roar of the motor, the violent shuddering of the machine, and the slow, stubborn resistance of the concrete. We took turns, spelling each other off when the muscle fatigue got too much. Liam would hammer away while I'd clear the broken chunks with a pry bar and a shovel. It was brutal, monotonous work. But as the afternoon wore on and a jagged, man-sized hole began to form in the center of the wall, something strange happened. I was prying a particularly large piece of rubble, loose when I felt it. A change in the air. A slight puff against my cheek. I pulled off my mask thinking it was just a draft from one of the 1,000 broken windows. The air in the factory was its usual cold, damp self. But the air coming out of the crack in the wall, it was different. "Hey, Liam, kill the power for a sec," I called out. The roar of the jackhammer died, plunging us into a sudden, ringing silence. The only sounds were the distant drip of water and the mournful whistle of wind through the steel skeleton of the building. "What's up?" Liam asked, pulling off his own mask, his face caked in grey dust. "Come here, feel this." He came over looking puzzled. I pointed to the hole, which was now about the size of a basketball. "Put your hand near it." He did, and his eyes widened. "Whoa, it's warm." It wasn't just warm. It was like the gentle heat from a radiator, a steady, constant warmth flowing out of the darkness behind the wall. In a building that hadn't had active heating in half a century, a building that was colder inside than it was out, it was impossible. We both stood there for a long moment, just staring at the hole, the silence stretching. "Maybe a geothermal vent?" Liam suggested, his voice a hopeful whisper. "A what? Under a concrete slab floor in the middle of a factory?" "No chance," I said, my own voice lower than I intended. The smell hit me next. It came with the warmth. It wasn't the smell of stale, trapped air. It wasn't mold or rot or decay. It smelled clean, almost sterile, like the air in a hospital or a server room, that faint tang of ozone and electronics. But underneath it, there was something else, a faint coppery scent, something organic. My heart started doing a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. Every instinct, every bit of common sense I had was screaming that this was wrong. A sealed room should be cold. It should be musty. It should be dead. This room felt active. "Okay," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Let's make the hole bigger. I want to see what's in there." The next hour was different. The work was no longer monotonous. Every blow of the hammer, every chunk of concrete we pulled away, felt like we were peeling back the skin on something we weren't supposed to see. The warm, clean-smelling air flowed out more strongly now, a steady, gentle river of it. Finally, the hole was big enough for a person to crawl through. The darkness inside was absolute. It seemed to drink the light from the main factory floor. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight from my toolbox. Liam stood behind me, so close I could feel his nervous energy. "You going in?" he whispered. "Just going to take a look first," I said, my mouth dry. I knelt down, my knee pads crunching on the rubble. The warm air washed over my face, a bizarrely comforting sensation that was at complete odds with the fear coiling in my stomach. I pointed the flashlight beam into the hole. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a small square room, maybe 15 by 15 feet. The floor, walls, and ceiling were all the same smooth, gray concrete as the wall we'd just destroyed. It was completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, no mobsters. Just an empty concrete box. I swept the light from left to right, tracing the clean corners, the seamless surfaces. It was pristine. There was no dust, no cobwebs, no signs of age at all. "See anything?" Liam asked, his voice cracking. "No, it's just an empty room," I said. A wave of anticlimactic relief washing over me. A totally empty. I stopped. My flashlight beam had reached the far wall, directly opposite me, and my blood ran cold. Bolted to the center of that wall was a small black metal box, about the size of a shoebox. A thick, armored cable ran from the bottom of it, disappearing seamlessly into the concrete floor. But that wasn't what made me freeze. On the face of the box was a single, small, circular lens. And behind that lens, a tiny pinprick of light had just blinked on. A soft, ruby-red light. It stared back at me from the darkness. And then I heard it. A sound that cut through the silence, clear as a bell. It wasn't loud. It was a soft, methodical click, followed by a low, electrical hum that seemed to vibrate through the very concrete I was kneeling on. The hum of a machine powering up. I flinched back from the hole so fast I knocked over a stack of broken concrete, the clatter of it shockingly loud in the sudden humming silence. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to break out. "Jack, what is it? What the hell was that sound?" Liam's voice was a strained whisper behind me. I couldn't answer. I was just staring into the impenetrable darkness of the hole, at the memory of that single, ruby-red eye blinking to life. The hum wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling. A low-frequency vibration that was traveling through the floor, up through the soles of my steel-toed boots, and into my bones. The entire factory had been a tomb for 50 years, and we had just woken something up. There's a machine in there," I finally managed to say, my voice raspy. "It just turned on." I scrambled to my feet, brushing dust from my jeans that I couldn't feel. My mind was racing. Power. How could there be power in a sealed concrete box in a derelict building whose main breakers had been cut decades ago? The city had severed all utilities to this place years before we even won the bid. There was no connection to the grid. A machine. What kind of machine? Liam crept closer, trying to peer over my shoulder. "Is it dangerous? Should we call Dave?" The thought of Dave was like a splash of cold water. His face, etched with impatience, would appear. He'd see the hole, the weird room, and he wouldn't see a mystery. He'd see a delay, an unforeseen complication, an expense. He'd probably order us to seal it back up, or worse, just get the big breaker and smash whatever was in there to pieces without a second thought. And the thought of that, of destroying this impossible thing without understanding it, felt profoundly wrong. No, not yet, I said, making a decision that felt both incredibly stupid and absolutely necessary. Give me the big flashlight, the million candle power one. Liam hesitated. Mate, I don't know. That light, that hum, this feels off. Everything about this is off, I countered, snatching the heavy yellow flashlight from his hand. That's why I need to see. Stay here. If you hear me yell, run and get Dave. Don't be a hero. He nodded, his face pale beneath the layer of gray dust. I took a deep breath, the warm, sterile, coppery air from the hole filling my lungs. It felt alien compared to the cold, musty air of the factory. I got back down on my knees, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm. I clicked on the big flashlight, and a brilliant white beam sliced through the darkness, far more powerful than my little pocket light. It washed out the shadows, illuminating every detail of the bizarre little room. The concrete walls weren't rough like normal poured concrete. They were smooth, almost polished, with a faint, almost imperceptible sheen, like they had graphite mixed into them. There were no marks, no seams, no imperfections. It was a perfect, seamless box. The hum was louder now, a steady, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, and the warmth was undeniable, like standing in a sunbeam on a cool day. My light found the black box again. The little red light was no longer blinking. It was a steady, solid dot, like the unblinking eye of some nocturnal predator. I swept the beam around the box. It was made of a matte black metal that didn't reflect the light. There were no screws, no seams, no visible way to open it. Just the lens and the thick armored cable snaking into the floor. No manufacturer's mark. No serial number. Nothing. It was utterly anonymous. Stealing my nerves, I crawled through the hole. The moment my body was fully inside, the world changed. The sounds of the factory, the dripping water, the whistling wind, vanished, cut off as if a door had been slammed shut. The only sound was the deep, pervasive hum. The air was thick with that strange, clean smell, and the warmth enveloped me. It felt like I had crawled out of the real world and into somewhere else entirely. I stood up, my boots making no sound on the smooth floor. The space felt charged, electric. I ran my hand along the wall. It was smooth as glass and radiated a gentle, uniform heat. This wasn't a room. It was an incubator, or a server, or a tomb. I couldn't decide which was more terrifying. I walked cautiously towards the far wall, towards the box with its glowing red eye. I felt like a bug under a microscope. The light felt like it was watching me, tracking me. Was it a camera? A sensor? I had a primal urge to smash it, but the thought of what might happen if I did was enough to stay my hand. I was about 5 feet away from it when my flashlight beam, sweeping across the floor, revealed something I hadn't seen from the entrance. A line, a faint hair-thin line etched into the polished concrete. It wasn't a crack or a scratch. It was too precise, too perfect. My curiosity overrode my fear. I followed it. It formed a perfect right angle, then another and another. It was a large rectangle in the center of the floor, about 8 feet long and 4 feet wide. A hatch. But like everything else in this room, it was seamless, with no handle, no hinges, no visible mechanism. I knelt down, tracing the line with my gloved finger. The concrete, or whatever it was a single, unbroken surface. The line was more like a pattern than a seam. It made no sense. How could it be a hatch if it was part of the floor? "Jack, you okay in there?" Liam's voice was muffled, distant. "Yeah, I'm fine," I yelled back, my own voice sounding strangely loud in the humming chamber. "I found something." As the words left my mouth, something changed. The hum, which had been a steady bass note, suddenly pitched higher, modulating into a more complex mechanical tone. A new sound joined it, a series of quiet, rapid clicks from within the black box on the wall. My head snapped up to look at it. The single red light blinked once, twice. Then it turned a brilliant, vivid green. My blood turned to ice. It was a confirmation light, an objective acquired light. It had seen something it was looking for. Me. Before I could even process what that meant, a low, grinding sound started, vibrating up through the floor. It was the sound of immense weight shifting, of stone scraping against stone. I looked down in horror. The thin, perfect line I had been tracing on the floor began to glow. A soft blue-white light pulsed from within the seam, outlining the rectangle in the floor with eerie precision. The grinding grew louder, closer, coming from directly beneath my feet. The entire slab of concrete I was kneeling on began to vibrate violently. It wasn't just a hatch. It was an elevator. And it was going down. Panic seized me, a pure reptilian instinct to flee. I scrambled backwards, away from the glowing rectangle, my boots slipping on the unnaturally smooth floor. The grinding sound intensified, resonating deep in my chest. The entire 8-by-4-foot slab in the center of the room was descending, sinking into the floor with a slow, inexorable precision. There was no dust, no crumbling debris. The edges of the descending platform and the stationary floor were perfectly sheared, the glowing blue line marking the impossibly small gap between them. "Jack, what's happening?" Liam's panicked yell was a lifeline from another world. I could see his silhouette blocking the jagged light of the hole we'd made. "It's the floor. A section of the floor is lowering," I shouted back, my voice tight with terror. "Get Dave. Get him now." I didn't wait to see if he listened. I scrambled for the exit, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the smooth gray walls. The hum in the room had changed again, rising in pitch to a high-frequency whine that made my teeth ache. As the platform descended, it revealed not a dark pit, but a chamber bathed in that same, soft blue-white light that emanated from the seams. The light spilled out into the small concrete room, casting long, sharp-edged shadows. I reached the hole and was halfway through, my shoulder scraping on the rough edge of the broken concrete, when a new sound froze me in my tracks. It was a soft mechanical hiss, like a pneumatic piston engaging. It came from the pit. I twisted around, my body contorted in the narrow opening, and shone my flashlight down into the glowing cavity. The platform had descended about 10 feet and stopped, revealing a much larger space below. And in the center of that space something was rising. A column of black, gleaming metal was ascending from the floor of the lower chamber, emerging into the blue light with a silent hydraulic smoothness. It was a pedestal, and on top of it, resting on a velvet-like black cushion, was a box. It wasn't a big box, maybe the size of a briefcase. It was made of a material that seemed to drink the light, a dark, non-reflective metal like the sensor on the wall. Intricate silver lines like circuits or veins were inlaid across its surface, glowing faintly with a light of their own. It looked ancient and futuristic at the same time, a piece of impossible technology resting in a hidden tomb. I was so captivated by the sight that I barely registered Liam returning, his heavy footsteps echoing in the factory. "Jack, get out of there! Dave's coming!" But I couldn't move. My gaze was fixed on the box. What was it? Why was it here? Hidden away in a seamless concrete vault, guarded by some kind of automated system, powered by a source I couldn't comprehend. The coppery smell in the air suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. It wasn't just a smell. It was the scent of ionized air, of powerful electronics, of something alive. "My God," I whispered, my voice lost in the high-pitched hum. The hiss sounded again, louder this time. I watched, mesmerized, as the top of the box began to open. It didn't have a lid. The surface itself seemed to peel back like the petals of a flower, the dark metal segments retracting silently into the body of the case. Inside, nestled on another black cushion, was an object. It was a sphere, about the size of a softball. It was a deep, impossible black, darker than any shadow. A perfect sphere of nothingness that seemed to warp the light around it. As I stared, I realized it wasn't solid black. Tiny points of light, like a miniature galaxy, swirled slowly within its depths. They were mesmerizing, beautiful, and utterly terrifying. "Jackson, what in the goddamn hell are you doing? Get out of that hole!" Dave's roar broke the spell. It was the voice of the real world, the world of deadlines and safety violations. He was standing by Liam, his face a mask of incandescent rage. I tore my eyes away from the sphere and began to pull myself the rest of the way out of the hole. As my boots cleared the opening and hit the dusty concrete of the factory floor, a loud clunk echoed from the room behind me. I spun around just in time to see the rising pedestal retract, pulling the open box and its swirling contents back down into the blue glowing pit. The heavy platform of floor began to rise again, the grinding sound returning as it slowly ascended to seal the chamber once more. The green light on the wall sensor blinked once, then turned back to the steady, watchful red. The high-pitched whine subsided, returning to the low, steady hum it had started with, In 30 seconds it was over. The floor was seamless again. The strange blue light was gone. It was just a warm, empty concrete box again, as if nothing had happened. I was on my hands and knees, breathing heavily, my heart feeling like it was going to explode. The transition back to the cold, damp factory air was a physical shock. "What was that? What was in there?" Dave demanded, stomping over and grabbing my arm, hauling me to my feet. He was a big guy, and his grip was like iron. I don't know," I stammered, my mind struggling to process what I'd just witnessed. A machine. The floor opened up. There was something. In a box. Dave peered into the hole, then looked back at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You've been breathing in too much concrete dust, kid. There's nothing in there. It's an empty room. You and Liam have been wasting company time, spooking yourselves over a damn echo." "No," I insisted, finding my voice. "The hum. The heat. You can feel it." Dave stuck his own head near the hole. He paused. I saw his expression shift, the anger momentarily replaced by confusion. He pulled his head back out slowly. "It's warm," he said, stating the obvious as if it were a complex scientific theory he'd just proven. He glanced at the solid concrete floor of the factory, then at the sealed room. Geothermal pipe must have burst under the slab. "Yeah, that's it. It's heating the sealed space. The hum is probably just the vibration from the water pressure." He was explaining it away, rationalizing the impossible because the alternative was too insane to contemplate. "Dave, that's not what it is," I pleaded. "A section of the floor went down. There was a light. There was a sphere full of stars." He just stared at me, his eyes narrowing. "A sphere full of stars? Right. You're done for the day, Jack. Clock out. Go home. Maybe see a doctor. Liam, you get a new partner tomorrow. I want this hole patched with cinder blocks and mortar by noon. We're walling it up. For good." "You can't do that." The words flew out of my mouth before I could stop them. "We can't just leave it. We have to report it. To someone." "Report what?" Dave snapped, his voice dangerously low. "A warm room? An overactive imagination? This is a construction site, not a sci-fi movie. We are behind schedule. We are over budget. We are not dealing with this. This room, and whatever fantasy you've cooked up about it, is now officially a utility chase that we are sealing for structural integrity. Do you understand me?" His words were final. He was erasing it. He was turning this profound, terrifying mystery into a footnote on a work order. My mind raced. The sphere, the swirling lights, the perfect, seamless technology hidden beneath a 50-year-old factory. Whatever it was, it felt important. World-changingly important. And he was going to entomb it again behind a wall of cheap cinder blocks. As Dave turned to bark more orders at Liam, I looked back at the hole. The little red eye of the sensor was still glowing from the darkness within, a single point of intelligence in the gloom. It was watching, and as I met its gaze, a thought, cold and sharp, pierced through my fear. The machine had reacted to me. It opened for me. Maybe it wasn't just watching. Maybe it was waiting. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, going through the motions of cleaning up the site, my mind a million miles away. I couldn't shake the image of the sphere. When I clocked out, Dave just gave me a hard look and told me to get some sleep. Liam wouldn't meet my eye. He was scared, and I knew he would do exactly as Dave said. I drove home, the city lights smearing past my window. But I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of that room being sealed up, of that mystery being lost forever, was a physical ache in my gut. I ended up in the parking lot of an all-night diner, staring into a cup of coffee I didn't drink. I had to go back. I had to see it again. Maybe without Dave there, without the pressure, I could figure it out. It was just after 2 a.m. when I slipped back through a gap in the chain-link fence surrounding the iron jaw. The massive factory was a silhouette against the moonless sky, more imposing and menacing than ever. I used the flashlight on my phone to navigate the treacherous, debris-strewn floor back to the foreman's offices. The air was colder than ever, a biting, damp chill that made the memory of the warm room seem like a fever dream. I found the hole. In the darkness, it was a gaping black mouth. I stood before it, my heart pounding, 1,000-second thoughts screaming at me to leave. But the pull of the mystery was stronger. I knelt down, took a breath, and shined my phone's light inside. The room was just as I'd left it. Silent. Empty. The low hum was a barely audible thrum in the background. The little red light on the sensor glowed faithfully from the far wall. "Okay," I whispered to myself, my voice trembling slightly. "It saw me before. Let's see if it sees me again." I crawled through the opening, my boots crunching on the rubble. I stood up inside the warm, humming space. The familiar feeling of being in another world washed over me. I stood perfectly still in the center of the room, right on the edge of the hidden platform, and I waited. Nothing happened. The hum remained low and steady. The red light just stared. "What do you want?" I asked the silence, feeling like a fool. "You opened for me before. What was different?" I paced the small room, my mind racing. What had I done? I'd yelled. Liam had yelled my name. The sound? Had it been a voice command? I tried it. "Open," I said, my voice sounding weak. Nothing. I tried yelling, "Jack!" Nothing. Frustration and disappointment began to set in. Maybe Dave was right. Maybe I had imagined it. A waking dream brought on by dust and fatigue. I slumped down, sitting on the edge of the platform line, and ran my hands through my hair. My glove caught on something. A loose thread. I pulled my glove off and looked at my hand. A small cut on my palm from a piece of concrete earlier was weeping a little blood. I hadn't even noticed it. I must have instinctively wiped my hand on my pants earlier, because there was a small smear of blood on the dusty fabric. As I stood up to leave, resigned to the mystery remaining a mystery, my hand brushed against the smooth, warm wall. I didn't think anything of it, until the room fell completely silent. The hum stopped. The red light on the sensor went out. For a terrifying second, I was plunged into absolute darkness and silence, and then a sound. The soft metallic click from the box on the wall. The green light blinked on, and a voice, ancient and resonant and utterly inhuman, spoke inside my head. It didn't come from the air. It bloomed directly in my consciousness. "Genetic signature accepted. Welcome, custodian." The words echoed in the chambers of my skull, not as sound, but as pure meaning. A concept imprinted directly onto my brain. Custodian. The word felt heavy, ancient. My legs gave out, and I landed hard on the smooth floor. My breath knocked out of me, not by the impact, but by the sheer, crushing impossibility of what was happening. My blood. It hadn't been my presence or my voice, it had been my blood. The room, now silent, was no longer just a strange space. It felt sacred. The low, grinding sound began again, much smoother this time, less like stone on stone, and more like perfectly machined parts engaging. The blue-white light once again outlined the hatch at my feet as the platform began its descent. There was no fear this time, only a profound, heart-stopping awe. I was kneeling on the edge, watching it go down, watching the blue-lit chamber open up beneath me. The black pedestal rose again, carrying its precious cargo. The briefcase-sized box opened with its silent, floral precision, revealing the sphere. The tiny galaxy of lights within it swirled faster now, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic light, like a sleeping heart that had just been woken up. "The archive has been dormant for 5,122 local solar cycles," the voice in my head communicated. The tone wasn't mechanical, it was imbued with a sense of immense patience, of time stretched to a scale I couldn't comprehend. The custodian line was thought to be severed. "Your genetic markers are a 99.8% match to the last registered caretaker." I stared at the sphere. The archive. My mind was a whirlwind. Custodian, caretaker. My family were welders and factory workers from this town for generations. We weren't this. Who? What are you? I thought, not daring to speak. I am the vessel. The archive is the memory. We are a seed, planted long ago, waiting for a compatible gardener. We are the collected knowledge of the travelers who charted this arm of the galaxy when your son was young. Biology, physics, history, art, life. All that they learned is within. A seed, buried under a factory, waiting for someone with the right blood to touch the wall. It was the plot of a movie I'd never believe, and yet here I was, living it. The warmth in the room suddenly made sense. It wasn't geothermal heat, it was life support. A low-power hibernation mode, keeping the delicate systems within from freezing over the millennia. The hum was its sleeping breath. We hadn't just broken a wall, we had performed CPR on a god. "The outer shell of this facility is failing." The voice continued, calm and factual. "Your activities have hastened its decay. The archive is now vulnerable. It must be moved or its knowledge will be lost. As custodian, this task falls to you. Me? I was Jack, the demolition guy. I moved rubble, not alien libraries. How? What am I supposed to do? I projected the thought, a desperate plea. The sphere seemed to brighten in response. The vessel contains the necessary tools, but it requires a conscious biological interface to operate in this environment. It requires you. As if on cue, a thin, almost invisible seam appeared on the side of the pedestal. A panel slid open, and a small metallic object glided out on a tray. It was a bracelet forged from the same silvery-veined metal as the markings on the box. It wasn't a solid band, but an open cuff, designed to be slipped onto a wrist. This was the moment, the point of no return. I could back out of the hole, go find Dave, and let them seal this up. I could pretend none of this happened, go back to my life of sledgehammers and dust masks, and try to forget the voice in my head and the galaxy in the box. Or I could take the bracelet. I could accept this insane, impossible reality. I thought of my life, of the endless cycle of demolition and construction, of tearing down the old to make way for the new, without ever really creating anything. And then I looked at the archive, the sum of a civilization's knowledge. This was the ultimate act of preservation. There was no real choice. My hand trembled as I reached down and picked up the bracelet. It was cool to the touch, and surprisingly light. It felt right. I took a deep breath and slipped it onto my right wrist. The moment the metal touched my skin, it constricted, fitting itself to me perfectly. 1,000 tiny filaments, finer than hairs, extended from the inner surface, painlessly piercing my skin. There was a brief, intense sensation of cold, like ice water being injected into my veins. And then, understanding. It wasn't like learning. It was like remembering. Vast, complex schematics bloomed in my mind. The true nature of the facility was laid bare. The concrete walls were a shielding material, laced with a conductive weave. The power source was a contained quantum singularity, tapped at an infinitesimal level, with a lifespan longer than the planet itself. The box, the pedestal, the sensor, they were all parts of a single organism, a machine that had been dreaming for 5,000 years. I understood how to interface with it, how to command it. The voice in my head was no longer a separate entity. It was part of a shared consciousness. We were linked. Primary objective: ensure the survival of the archive, I thought, but the thought was clearer, sharper, no longer just my own. I looked at my hands. With the bracelet on, I could see a faint, blue-white tracery of light under my skin, following my veins. I looked at the jagged hole in the wall. A problem. A structural breach. I focused on the wall, on the smooth, gray material. In my mind's eye, I saw its molecular structure. I willed it to change. From the wall, a trickle of gray, viscous liquid, like mercury, began to flow. It moved with a slow, deliberate purpose towards the hole, filling in the cracks, bridging the gaps. It hardened as it settled, a perfect, seamless patch forming over the damage we had done. In less than a minute, the wall was whole again. The only evidence we had ever been there was the pile of concrete rubble on the factory floor outside. Incredible, I breathed, the word feeling small and inadequate. Stealth and security are paramount, the linked consciousness affirmed. The next phase requires relocation. I understood. We couldn't stay here. Dave and his crew would be back in a few hours. They would find the wall repaired, and their questions would lead to complications we couldn't afford. I looked down at the archive, still open on its pedestal. With my new understanding, I knew what to do. I focused, and the pedestal descended. The platform rose, sealing the lower chamber. Then I turned my attention to the entire 15 by 15-foot room. It was not a room. It was a ship, a chrysalis, and it was time for it to fly. Detaching primary moorings, I thought, and a series of deep, resonant thunks echoed from far below, the sound of immense locking clamps releasing after centuries of silence. The gentle warmth in the room began to increase, and the hum returned, stronger and more purposeful. I could feel the singularity drawing more power, the entire structure coming fully online for the first time in millennia. I walked to the new smooth wall and placed my hand on it. I didn't see it as concrete anymore. I saw it as a configurable shell. I willed an opening, and a perfect circle, 5 feet in diameter, irised open, revealing the cold, dark factory outside. The pre-dawn sky was just beginning to turn a bruised purple through the broken skylights 60 feet above. I stepped out onto the factory floor, turning to look back at the gray, featureless cube I had spent the night in. It looked exactly as it had when we first found it, an anonymous block of concrete. But now I knew the truth. It was the most important thing on the planet. Dave and Liam would arrive in a few hours. They would find the rubble from the wall, but the wall itself would be gone, vanished into thin air. They would think they were going crazy. Maybe they'd think I came back and somehow demolished the whole thing. They would never, ever guess the truth. A low, powerful thrum began to emanate from the cube. It lifted from the floor silently, a quarter of an inch, then a foot, then 10 feet, its ascent utterly silent and graceful. It defied gravity as easily as I defied a thought. It was waiting for me. I looked around the iron jaw one last time, at the sleeping metal giants and the cathedral of rust. My old life. It felt like a story someone else had lived. I wasn't Jack the demo guy anymore. I was the custodian. I had a job to do. A promise to keep that had been made by an ancestor I would never know, to a people I would never meet. The cube hovered near a massive gaping hole in the factory roof. With a final thought, I sealed the circular opening I'd made, making it a perfect, seamless box once more. Then I focused on the bracelet, on the connection. The world dissolved into a blur of non-space, and an instant later, I was standing inside the control room, the archive pulsing gently in its lowered chamber beneath my feet. Through a newly formed viewport, I could see the iron jaw shrinking below, a skeleton of a forgotten age. Course laid in. The archive communicated, showing me a destination. A deep, inaccessible cave system in the most remote mountain range on the continent. A new, safer place to sleep. Estimated travel time, 4.7 minutes. As the ship accelerated, silent and invisible, into the upper atmosphere, I watched the world spread out below me. I was leaving everything I'd ever known behind, but I wasn't losing a thing. I was gaining a universe. The galaxy in the sphere was now my responsibility, its secrets my own. And for the first time, I felt like I was building something, not just tearing it down. I was the guardian of a forgotten legacy, a breathing room carrying the warm memory of the stars. And my work was just beginning.